Clara Louise stared at her reflection in the dusty mirror, her voluminous figure straining against her modest dress as tears welled in her eyes. Today marked 5 years since she'd been labeled unmarriageable by the townsfolk of Provo, Utah. But little did she know that fate would soon gallop into her life wearing dusty boots and a weathered hat. The year was 1878, and Provo was changing rapidly. The railroad had brought prosperity to some, but for Clara, it merely brought more prying eyes to judge her size. At 26, she had resigned herself to a life of solitude, managing the small bakery she had inherited from her mother 3 years prior. "Clara, honey, have you finished those sweet rolls for the Donnellys?" Martha, her elderly assistant, called from the front of the shop. Clara wiped her eyes hastily and smoothed down her apron. "Coming right out," she replied, forcing cheer into her voice. The morning passed in a blur of flour and sugar, Clara's hands working methodically as her mind wandered. The bell above the door jingled continuously. Saturdays were always busy. She preferred to stay in the back, away from the stares and whispers. Even after all these years, the words still stung. Too much woman for any man to handle. Shame about her size, such a pretty face. What man wants a wife who eats more than he does? These comments, often poorly disguised as concern, had built walls around her heart higher than the Wasatch Mountains that overlooked the valley. The afternoon lull finally came, and Clara wiped her flour-covered hands on her apron. "Martha, I'm going to run to the mercantile for more vanilla." "We're nearly out." Martha nodded, her wrinkled face creasing into a smile. "Take your time, dear. It's cooled down some." Clara grabbed her shawl and stepped out into the autumn afternoon. The air carried a crispness that hinted at the approaching winter, and golden leaves skittered across the dirt road. She kept her eyes downcast as she walked, a habit formed from years of avoiding eye contact with those who might judge her. Her peaceful journey was interrupted by shouts from down the street. A commotion had erupted outside the saloon, not unusual for a Saturday. Clara kept to the boardwalk, intending to hurry past. "Whoa there!" a deep voice called out as a large stallion reared up, blocking her path. Clara stumbled backward, nearly falling as the horse's hooves came dangerously close. A strong hand caught her arm, steadying her before she could hit the ground. "My apologies, madam," said the owner of both the hand and the voice. "Thunderbolt here gets skittish around gunfire." Clara looked up into the bluest eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and a jawline that could have been carved from stone. Dust clung to his denim pants and cotton shirt, and a leather vest hung open over broad shoulders. He wore a weathered Stetson pushed back on his head, revealing tousled brown hair. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his expression. Clara nodded mutely, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. She stepped back, pulling her arm free from his grasp. "I'm fine, thank you," she managed, unable to meet his gaze. "Name's Lucas Turner," he said, tipping his hat. "Just rode in from Colorado Territory." "Clara Louise," she replied softly, then hurriedly added, "If you'll excuse me, I have errands to attend to." She stepped around him and his imposing horse, feeling his eyes on her back as she walked away. Her heart hammered in her chest, not from fear, but from the unexpected kindness in his voice. There had been no judgment in those blue eyes, only genuine concern. At the mercantile, Clara tried to focus on her shopping list, but her mind kept drifting back to the stranger's face. She paid for her vanilla and turned to leave, only to find Lucas Turner examining a display of knives near the entrance. He looked up as she approached, a smile spreading across his face. "We meet again, Miss Louise." Clara clutched her package tighter. "Mr. Turner," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "I was hoping to find a good place for a meal in this town," he said, falling into step beside her as she exited the store. "Been living off jerky and hardtack for too long." Before Clara could respond, Mrs. Patterson, the town gossip, approached. "Clara, dear, who's your handsome friend?" Clara felt her cheeks burn. "This is Mr. Turner. He's just passing through," she explained, avoiding Mrs. Patterson's probing gaze. "Lucas Turner," he corrected, extending his hand to the older woman. "And I might be staying a while, depending on what opportunities I find here." Mrs. Patterson's eyes gleamed with interest. "Well, Mr. Turner, you must join us for the harvest dance tomorrow evening. The whole town will be there." Lucas glanced at Clara. "Will you be attending, Miss Louise?" Clara's stomach tightened with anxiety. She hadn't attended a town social in years. "I am usually quite busy with the bakery." "Clara owns the finest bakery in Utah Territory," Mrs. Patterson interjected. "Her apple pies have won ribbons at the county fair." Lucas's eyes widened with interest. "A bakery! Now that's something worth staying in town for." Clara couldn't tell if he was being sincere or mocking her. Given her size, jokes about her relationship with food were common and cruel. "If you'll both excuse me," she murmured, "I should be getting back." She hurried away, ignoring Mrs. Patterson's calls to reconsider the dance. Her sanctuary was only a few buildings away, and she slipped inside, the familiar smell of yeast and sugar enveloping her like an embrace. Martha looked up from where she was rolling dough. "You're flushed, dear. Did something happen?" Clara shook her head, unwilling to discuss the encounter. "Just walked too quickly," she lied, moving to wash her hands at the basin. The rest of the day passed in a blur of work, but Clara's thoughts kept returning to Lucas Turner and his kind eyes. It had been so long since a man had looked at her with anything other than dismissal or disgust. She told herself not to read too much into it. He was just being polite, after all. As she closed the shop that evening, Clara caught sight of Lucas again, exiting the hotel across the street. He waved when he spotted her, and to her surprise, began crossing the road. "Miss Louise," he called, "I was hoping I'd see you again." Clara stood frozen by the door, keys clutched tightly in her hand. "Mr. Turner," she acknowledged, unsure what else to say. He stopped a respectful distance away. "I wondered if I might call on you tomorrow. Perhaps you could recommend some of your favorite baked goods." Clara blinked in surprise. "The bakery is closed on Sundays." Lucas smiled, a dimple appearing in his left cheek. "I meant as a customer, but I'd be honored if you'd allow me to escort you on a walk instead. The mountains around here are mighty pretty." Clara's mind raced with confusion. Men didn't ask to walk with her. Men didn't notice her at all except to judge. I don't understand," she stammered. Lucas's brow furrowed. "It's a simple invitation, Miss Louise, just a walk." Clara looked at him properly for the first time, searching for signs of mockery or an ulterior motive. Finding none, she still couldn't bring herself to accept. "Thank you, but I'm afraid I have prior commitments." Disappointment flashed across his face. "Another time, perhaps," he said, tipping his hat before turning away. Clara watched him go, a strange mixture of relief and regret washing over her. As she walked home to her small cottage at the edge of town, she wondered what it would be like to accept such an invitation. To walk alongside a handsome stranger without fear of ridicule. To believe, even for a moment, that his interest might be genuine. The next morning, Clara woke earlier than necessary, despite it being her day off. Sleep had been elusive, her dreams filled with blue eyes and gentle hands. She dressed in her Sunday best and attended church as usual, sitting in her customary pew near the back. She felt his presence before she saw him, a prickle of awareness that made her straighten her posture. Lucas Turner entered the church, nodding respectfully to those who greeted him. To Clara's surprise, he made his way toward her pew. "May I?" he asked quietly, gesturing to the empty space beside her. Several heads turned in their direction, curious eyes taking in the scene. Clara nodded silently, shifting slightly to make room. Throughout the service, she was acutely aware of his presence, the clean scent of soap, the warmth radiating from his body, the way his deep voice joined in the hymns. When Reverend Miller called for the congregation to greet one another, Lucas turned to her with a smile. "Good morning, Miss Louise," he said softly. "Good morning, Mr. Turner," she replied, unable to meet his gaze for more than a moment. After the service, Clara quickly made her way outside, hoping to avoid any awkward conversations. She had nearly reached the street when Lucas caught up with her. "Miss Louise," he called, slightly out of breath. "That invitation for a walk still stands." Clara hesitated, torn between desire and fear. Before she could respond, Mrs. Donnelly approached, her 3 young daughters in tow. "Clara, dear, we missed you at the social last night," Mrs. Donnelly said, her eyes darting curiously between Clara and Lucas. "I had inventory to complete," Clara explained, the lie coming easily after years of practice. Mrs. Donnelly's attention shifted to Lucas. "You must be new in town. I'm Margaret Donnelly." "Lucas Turner," he replied with a polite nod. "Just arrived from Colorado." "And what brings you to our little corner of Utah?" Mrs. Donnelly inquired, not bothering to hide her interest. "Looking for a place to set down roots," Lucas answered. "I've been wandering for too long." Mrs. Donnelly's expression brightened. "Well, you must join us for Sunday dinner. Clara too, of course," she added as an afterthought. Clara opened her mouth to decline, but Lucas spoke first. "That's mighty kind of you, Mrs. Donnelly, but I've already asked Miss Louise to join me for a walk this afternoon." He turned to Clara with a questioning look. "Unless you've changed your mind." Put on the spot, Clara could only shake her head. "No, I haven't changed my mind," she said softly. Mrs. Donnelly's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. "Well then," she said with a barely concealed smile, "another time, perhaps." As the Donnelly family moved away, Clara turned to Lucas with a mixture of confusion and irritation. "Why did you do that?" "Do what?" he asked innocently. "Make it sound like I had already accepted your invitation." Lucas had the grace to look sheepish. "I apologize if I overstepped. You seemed uncomfortable, and I thought perhaps you might prefer a walk with me to dinner with Mrs. Donnelly and her obvious matchmaking intentions." Clara couldn't help but laugh. "She does have 3 unmarried daughters." Lucas smiled, relief evident in his expression. "So, about that walk." Clara took a deep breath. "What harm could come from one walk?" "I need to change first," she said, gesturing to her church dress. "I'll call for you in an hour," Lucas suggested. "Where do you live?" Clara gave him directions to her cottage, then watched as he tipped his hat and walked away. She hurried home, her mind racing with thoughts of what to wear, what to say, how to act. It had been so long since she'd spent time with a man who wasn't a customer or a relative. An hour later, dressed in her most flattering day dress, a deep blue that matched her eyes, Clara waited nervously by her window. True to his word, Lucas appeared at her gate precisely on time, now wearing a clean shirt and his hat freshly brushed. Heart pounding, Clara opened her door before he could knock. "Mr. Turner," she greeted him, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Miss Louise," he replied, his eyes taking in her appearance with evident appreciation. "You look lovely." Clara flushed at the compliment. "Thank you," she murmured, stepping out and closing the door behind her. They walked in silence for a few minutes, heading toward the trail that led into the foothills. Clara stole glances at her companion, still unable to fathom why this handsome stranger had singled her out for attention. "You're wondering why I asked you to walk with me," Lucas said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. Clara stumbled slightly, caught off guard by his directness. "The thought had crossed my mind," she admitted. Lucas smiled. "I found that life's too short not to pursue what interests me." "And you, Miss Louise, interest me greatly." Clara's steps faltered again. "Mr. Turner, Lucas, please." "Lucas," she corrected, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. "I'm not accustomed to attention from men, especially not men like you." He raised an eyebrow. "Men like me." "Handsome men," Clara blurted out, immediately wishing she could take back the words. Lucas's smile widened. "You think I'm handsome?" Clara's cheeks burned hotter. "I think you know very well that you are," he laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "And I think you don't know how beautiful you are." Clara stopped walking, suspicion replacing embarrassment. "Please don't mock me." Lucas's expression grew serious. "I'm not mocking you, Clara. I find you beautiful." She shook her head, disbelieving. "You don't have to pretend." "I know what I look like. I know what people say." "And what is that?" he asked quietly. Clara looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "That I'm too large, too much, that no man would want." Lucas stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "Those people are fools. Where I come from, a woman with curves is considered blessed. It means she'll survive hard winters and bear healthy children." Clara dared to look up, searching his face for signs of deception. Finding none, she still couldn't bring herself to believe him. "You're being kind, but I'm being honest," he interrupted. "And I'd like the chance to know you better if you'll let me." They had reached a clearing that overlooked the town. Lucas gestured toward a flat boulder. "Shall we rest a while?" Clara nodded, grateful for the chance to gather her thoughts. She settled on the boulder, arranging her skirts carefully. Lucas sat beside her, leaving enough space between them to be proper. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "How did you come to own a bakery?" Grateful for the change of subject, Clara explained how she had learned to bake from her mother, who had opened the shop after her father died. "When she passed 3 years ago, it became mine. It's not just a business, it's her legacy." Lucas listened intently, asking questions that showed genuine interest in her life and work. In turn, he shared stories of his own journey, how he had left his family's farm in Kentucky at 18 to seek his fortune in the West, working as a ranch hand, a miner, even a scout for the army before deciding to settle down. "What made you choose Provo?" Clara asked. Lucas looked out over the valley, his expression thoughtful. "Honestly, I wasn't planning to stay. I was heading to California, just passing through. But sometimes a place just feels right, you know?" Clara nodded, though she had never left Utah territory. "And does Provo feel right to you?" Lucas turned to her, his blue eyes intense. "It's starting to." The afternoon passed more quickly than Clara could have imagined. They talked about everything and nothing: books they had read, places Lucas had seen, Clara's dreams of expanding her bakery. Before she knew it, the sun was beginning to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and pink. "We should head back," Clara said reluctantly, rising from their seat. Lucas stood as well, offering his arm. After a moment's hesitation, Clara placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, hyper-aware of the strength beneath her fingertips. "Thank you for today," Lucas said as they walked back toward town. "I can't remember when I've enjoyed a conversation more." Clara smiled, surprised to realize she felt the same way. "It was unexpected," she admitted. "In a good way, I hope," Clara nodded. "Yes, in a good way." They reached her cottage just as twilight was deepening into night. Clara reluctantly withdrew her hand from his arm. "Thank you for the walk," she said formally, suddenly shy again. Lucas studied her face in the fading light. "Would it be too forward to ask if I might call on you again?" Clara's heart skipped a beat. "The bakery opens at 7, she said. "Customers are always welcome." Lucas grinned. "I'll be there, but I meant as a caller, not a customer." Clara took a deep breath. "Wednesday evenings I close early," she said. "I usually take supper at home." "Then may I join you for supper on Wednesday?" Lucas asked, his expression hopeful. Clara nodded before she could lose her nerve. "Yes, you may." Lucas's smile was brighter than the first stars appearing overhead. "Until tomorrow morning, then," he said, tipping his hat. "Sleep well, Clara." As she watched him walk away, Clara couldn't help but wonder if this was all a dream or perhaps a cruel joke that would end in heartbreak. Yet something about Lucas Turner's sincerity made her want to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, he saw something in her that others had missed. Monday morning arrived with a flurry of activity. Clara rose before dawn to prepare the day's first batch of bread, her hands working automatically while her mind replayed yesterday's conversations. By the time she unlocked the front door at 7, she had nearly convinced herself that Lucas wouldn't appear. But at precisely 7:30, the bell above the door jingled, and there he stood, hat in hand and a smile on his face. "Good morning, Miss Louise," he greeted her, his eyes taking in the array of baked goods displayed in the glass case. "Mr. Turner," Clara acknowledged, aware of Martha's curious gaze from where she was serving another customer. "What can I get for you today? What do you recommend?" he asked, leaning slightly over the counter. "The cinnamon rolls are fresh from the oven," Clara suggested, gesturing to the tray behind her. "Perfect," Lucas said. "I'll take 2 and a coffee if you have it," Clara nodded, turning to prepare his order. As she worked, she felt his eyes on her, not critical or mocking, but warm with appreciation. It was a novel sensation, one that made her hands tremble slightly as she placed the rolls on a plate. "Will you join me?" Lucas asked, nodding toward the small table in the corner that Clara kept for customers who wished to enjoy their purchases on the premises. "I'm working," Clara reminded him, glancing around the busy shop. "Just for a few minutes," he pressed. "I want to hear about your plans for the bakery." Before Clara could respond, Martha appeared at her elbow. "Go on, dear," the older woman urged. "I can manage for a bit." With a grateful smile for her assistant, Clara poured herself a cup of coffee and joined Lucas at the table. For the next 15 minutes, she found herself explaining her ideas for expanding her offerings to include more fancy pastries like those she'd read about in a French cookbook. "You're quite the businesswoman," Lucas observed, his tone admiring. "Your mother would be proud." Clara blushed at the compliment. "It's just a small bakery." "It's more than that," Lucas insisted. "It's your passion. That's rare and valuable." Their conversation was interrupted by a new wave of customers. Clara excused herself, returning to her place behind the counter. Lucas lingered over his coffee, watching her work with an expression Clara couldn't quite decipher, before finally leaving with a promise to return the next day. And return he did every morning that week, sometimes staying for just a few minutes, other times lingering until the morning rush subsided. Each day, Clara found herself looking forward to his visits, opening up a little more with each conversation. By Wednesday, the entire town was buzzing with speculation about the handsome newcomer and his obvious interest in the baker girl, as Clara was often called. Some whispered that he must want something from her, perhaps he was after her business or property. Others suggested more scandalous motives. Few believed he could genuinely be attracted to Clara. Martha reported these rumors with indignation. "Don't you listen to them, Clara," she advised as they prepared for closing on Wednesday afternoon. "That young man has honest eyes. I've seen how he looks at you." Clara sighed as she wiped down the counters. "It doesn't make sense, Martha. Men like Lucas Turner don't court women like me." "And what kind of woman are you?" Martha challenged, hands on her hips. Clara gestured to her ample figure. "You know what I mean." Martha shook her head firmly. I know you're kind and clever and talented. I know you have a laugh that lights up a room when you let yourself laugh. Maybe this Lucas Turner sees those things too. Clara wanted to believe it was possible, but years of rejection had built a fortress around her heart. Still, as she hurried home to prepare for supper, she found herself taking extra care with her appearance, selecting a dress she had made but never worn, a rich burgundy that complemented her fair skin and brought out the auburn highlights in her brown hair. At precisely 6 o'clock, a knock sounded at her door. Clara took a deep breath, smoothed her hands over her skirt, and opened it to find Lucas standing on her porch, a bouquet of wildflowers in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. "These are for you," he said, offering the flowers with a smile that made Clara's heart flutter. "Thank you," she murmured, accepting them. "Please come in." Lucas entered, removing his hat as he stepped over the threshold. He looked around the small but tidy cottage with appreciation. "You have a lovely home." Clara busied herself finding a vase for the flowers, pleased that she had spent extra time cleaning that morning. "It's not much, but it's mine." "That makes it special," Lucas said, setting the wine on the table. "Something smells delicious." Clara had prepared a simple meal of roasted chicken, potatoes, and fresh vegetables from her small garden. As they sat down to eat, she found herself relaxing in his company, the conversation flowing as easily as it had during their Sunday walk. "Have you thought more about expanding the bakery?" Lucas asked as they finished their meal. Clara nodded. "I've been setting aside money for a larger oven, and there's space to add a proper dining area if I remove the storeroom wall." "You have a good eye for business," Lucas commented. "My father always said that's rarer than gold in these parts." "What does your father do?" Clara asked, realizing she knew little about Lucas's family. "He was a farmer, but he passed on 5 years ago," Lucas explained. "My mother still runs the farm with my younger brother." "I'm sorry for your loss," Clara said softly. Lucas smiled sadly. "Thank you. He was a good man. Taught me everything important: how to work hard, treat people fairly, recognize what matters in life." "And what does matter?" Clara asked. Lucas's eyes met hers across the table. "Honesty, kindness, having someone to share your days with who sees you for who you truly are." Clara looked down, suddenly unable to hold his gaze. "That's a rare thing." "Yes," Lucas agreed quietly. "It is." After supper, they moved to Clara's small sitting room. Lucas surprised her by asking about the books on her shelf, and they discovered a shared love of adventure tales and historical accounts. "My father thought reading was a waste of time for girls," Clara admitted, "but my mother snuck books to me anyway. She said a woman with an educated mind would never be truly alone." "She was wise," Lucas said. "My mother taught me to read before I started school, said a man who can't read is at the mercy of those who can." The evening passed in comfortable conversation, and Clara found herself reluctant for it to end. When the mantel clock chimed 9, Lucas rose reluctantly. "I should go," he said. "You open early and I've kept you talking half the night." Clara walked him to the door, suddenly shy again. "Thank you for coming." Lucas paused in the doorway, his expression serious. "Clara, would you allow me to court you properly?" Though she had begun to hope for just this question, hearing it spoken aloud still stunned her. "Why?" she asked before she could stop herself. Lucas's brow furrowed. "Why what? Why would you want to court me?" Clara clarified, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "There are plenty of prettier, slimmer girls in town, girls without my limitations." Understanding dawned in Lucas's eyes. He stepped closer, not touching her but close enough that Clara could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I don't want those other girls," he said simply. "I want to know you, your thoughts, your dreams, your fears. I find myself thinking about you when we're apart, looking forward to seeing your smile each morning." He paused, his voice softening. "And yes, I find you beautiful. Your curves, your gentle hands, the way your eyes light up when you talk about baking. All of it." Clara's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever spoken to her like this. "I don't know what to say." Lucas smiled. "Say you'll let me court you. Say you'll give us a chance to see where this might lead." Clara took a deep breath, pushing aside years of doubt and insecurity. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll let you court me." Lucas's smile was radiant. He took her hand gently, raising it to his lips. "Thank you," he said simply, before releasing her fingers and stepping back. "Good night, Clara Louise. Sleep well." As Clara closed the door behind him, she leaned against it, heart racing with a mixture of excitement and fear. Could this be real? Could a man like Lucas truly see past her size to the woman beneath? Only time would tell, but for the first time in years, Clara allowed herself to hope. Over the next few weeks, Lucas courted Clara with a dedication that left the town buzzing. He brought her flowers every few days, not expensive bouquets from a florist, but wildflowers he gathered himself during his rides through the countryside. He appeared at the bakery each morning for breakfast and often returned at closing time to walk her home. On Sundays after church, they took long walks through the foothills, talking for hours about their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Lucas told her of his wandering years, of the loneliness he had felt despite being surrounded by people. Clara gradually revealed her own loneliness, the pain of growing up as the big girl, the cruel comments, the social rejection she had endured. "People can be needlessly cruel," Lucas observed one crisp October afternoon as they sat by a small stream. "My sister Elizabeth was born with a twisted foot, the things children said to her." He shook his head, but she never let it define her. "She married a good man who saw her strength, not her limp." "She sounds remarkable," Clara said. "She is," Lucas agreed. "She reminds me of you in that way, strong, determined, refusing to be limited by others' perceptions." Clara smiled, touched by the comparison. "I don't always feel strong." "That's the thing about strength," Lucas said, taking her hand. "It's not about feeling strong all the time. It's about continuing on despite the fear." As October gave way to November, their courtship deepened. Lucas had taken a job at the town's livery stable, working with horses and repairing wagons. His skill with animals and woodworking quickly earned him the respect of the townspeople, and gradually, the whispers about his interest in Clara changed from mockery to curiosity, and in some cases, approval. "He seems steady," Mrs. Donnelly commented one morning as she collected her bread order. "Not like some of these drifters who come through town." Clara merely smiled, unwilling to discuss her private happiness with the town gossip. But privately, she marveled at how Lucas had integrated himself into the community, making friends and building a reputation as a hard-working, honest man. One evening in mid-November, Lucas arrived at the bakery just as Clara was closing, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. "What is it?" Clara asked, recognizing the look that meant he had a surprise planned. "Bundle up," he instructed. "I want to show you something." Intrigued, Clara fetched her warmest shawl and followed him outside. To her surprise, a sleek buggy waited at the curb, hitched to Lucas's stallion, Thunderbolt. "Whose buggy is this?" she asked. "Mine," Lucas replied proudly. "Just finished restoring it today. Mr. Jenkins at the livery let me use it as payment for some extra work I did." Clara ran her hand along the polished wood. "It's beautiful." "Climb in," Lucas urged, offering his hand to help her up to the seat. As they drove through town and out toward the hills, Lucas explained how he had spent his evenings working on the buggy, replacing worn parts and refinishing the wood. "I thought it might be nice to have for our outings," he said, "especially with winter coming on." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Clara deeply. Lucas had been slowly building a life in Provo, piece by piece, and this buggy represented another step toward permanence. They stopped atop a ridge overlooking the valley, now dusted with the first light snow of the season. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the landscape, making it seem almost magical. "I wanted to bring you here at sunset," Lucas explained, wrapping a blanket around Clara's shoulders against the evening chill. "It's my favorite view in the whole valley." As they sat side by side, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple, Lucas took Clara's hand in his. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "About what?" Clara prompted when he fell silent. "About us. About the future." Lucas turned to face her fully. "Clara, these past weeks have been the happiest of my life. I came to Utah looking for a place to belong, but I found so much more. I found you." Clara's heart began to race. "Lucas, please let me finish," he said gently. "I know our courtship has been brief by some standards. But when you've spent as many years searching as I have, you learn to recognize what matters when you find it." He took a deep breath. "Clara Louise, I love you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Clara stared at him, momentarily speechless. Despite their deepening relationship, she hadn't dared to hope for a proposal so soon or perhaps at all. A part of her still feared that Lucas would eventually see what others saw when they looked at her. Too much woman, too large, too undesirable. "Clara," Lucas prompted, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "I understand if you need time to—" "Yes," Clara interrupted, finding her voice at last. "Yes, Lucas, I will marry you." Relief and joy spread across his face. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ring, a delicate silver band set with a blue stone that matched his eyes. "It was my grandmother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "My mother sent it when I wrote to her about you." Clara stared at the ring, overwhelmed by its significance. "You wrote to your mother about me?" Lucas nodded, smiling. "Of course. I told her I'd found the woman I want to build a life with. A woman with a kind heart, a clever mind, and the most beautiful smile in the territory." "What did she say?" Clara asked, suddenly anxious about what his family might think of his choice. "She said she can't wait to meet you," Lucas assured her, squeezing her hand, "and that any woman who could make her wandering son want to settle down must be extraordinary indeed." Clara's eyes filled with tears not of sorrow, but of overwhelming joy. "I love you, Lucas Turner," she whispered, the words she had been holding back for weeks finally breaking free. Lucas's answering smile was radiant in the fading light. "May I kiss you, Clara Louise?" he asked softly. Clara nodded, her heart pounding as Lucas leaned forward, cupping her face gently in his calloused hands. His lips met hers in a kiss that was tender and reverent, a promise of the life they would build together. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, the first stars had appeared in the darkening sky. "We should head back," Lucas said reluctantly. "It's getting cold." As they drove back toward town, Clara nestled against Lucas's side, the warmth of his body keeping the November chill at bay. For the first time in her life, she felt beautiful, cherished, and worthy of love. It was a feeling she had never expected to experience, one she would treasure for the rest of her days. News of their engagement spread through Provo like wildfire. Some expressed genuine happiness for the couple, while others reacted with shock or even disapproval. Clara heard the whispers, of course speculation about whether she was with child, she wasn't. Whether Lucas was after her property, he had already established himself independently. Whether the marriage would last once the novelty wore off. But for perhaps the first time in her life, Clara found herself unmoved by others' opinions. Lucas loved her, he showed her in countless ways each day. And gradually, She was learning to love herself through his eyes. They set their wedding date for Christmas Eve, giving them just over a month to prepare. Clara worked on her dress in the evenings after closing the bakery, fashioning a gown of ivory satin that, with Martha's expert help, flattered her generous curves instead of attempting to disguise them. Lucas, meanwhile, threw himself into preparing a home for them. He had purchased a small property on the outskirts of town, 3 acres, with a modest house that needed substantial repairs. Each day after finishing at the livery, he worked until dark, replacing damaged boards, fixing the roof, painting walls. Clara visited often, bringing food and offering opinions on his renovations. Together, they planned where furniture would go, what colors to paint each room, how to arrange the kitchen to accommodate Clara's love of baking. "This room gets the morning light," Lucas observed as they stood in what would become their bedroom. "You'll like that, I think. You've always been an early riser." Clara smiled at how well he knew her habits already. "It's perfect," she said, imagining waking beside him as sunlight streamed through the windows. As their wedding day approached, Clara found herself busier than ever. The bakery was flooded with holiday orders, and between work and wedding preparations, she barely had time to breathe. Lucas noticed her exhaustion one evening as he walked her home. "You're working too hard," he chided gently, his arm around her waist. "Let Martha handle more of the Christmas orders," Clara shook her head stubbornly. "These customers have depended on me for years. I won't disappoint them now." Lucas stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression of concern. "Clara, my love, you need to rest. You're pale with fatigue." "I'm fine," Clara insisted, even as she swayed slightly on her feet. Lucas frowned. "You're not fine. Tomorrow I'm coming to help at the bakery." Clara started to protest, but Lucas silenced her with a gentle finger to her lips. "No arguments. I may not be a baker, but I can certainly follow directions. And before you say it yes, I'll wash my hands thoroughly first." Clara couldn't help but laugh at how well he anticipated her objections. "Very well," she conceded, "but only because I know you'll come anyway." True to his word, Lucas appeared at the bakery before dawn the next morning. Under Clara's direction, he proved to be a capable assistant, kneading dough with his strong hands, fetching ingredients, and even decorating cookies with surprising skill. "You never told me you were artistic," Clara remarked as she watched him pipe delicate patterns onto gingerbread. Lucas grinned. "My mother insisted all her children learn what she called useful arts, said you never know when a skill might come in handy." Working together, they completed the day's baking in record time. Martha, impressed by their efficiency, declared that Lucas should become a permanent part of the operation after the wedding. "We could expand the dining area like you've been wanting to," she suggested to Clara. "With Lucas helping, you'd have time to try those French pastries you're always talking about." The idea took root in Clara's mind. She had always dreamed of growing the business, but had been limited by what she could accomplish alone. With Lucas by her side, new possibilities emerged. "What do you think?" she asked him as they walked home that evening. "Would you consider joining the bakery, at least until the livery needs you full-time?" Lucas squeezed her hand. "I'd be honored. And truthfully, I enjoy the work more than I expected." "There's something satisfying about creating something people enjoy so much," Clara beamed. "That's exactly how I feel. When someone tastes something I've made and their face lights up, there's no better feeling." "Except perhaps this," Lucas murmured, stopping beneath a lamppost to pull her into a gentle kiss. When they parted, Clara's cheeks were flushed with more than just the cold. "4 more days," she whispered, referring to their wedding. Lucas groaned playfully. "The longest 4 days of my life." On Christmas Eve morning, Clara woke to softly falling snow, a perfect backdrop for a winter wedding. Martha arrived early to help her prepare, bringing with her Clara's best friend from childhood, Sarah, who had traveled from Salt Lake City for the occasion. "You look radiant," Sarah declared as Clara emerged from behind the screen in her wedding gown. "Lucas Turner is a fortunate man." Clara smoothed her hands over the ivory satin, still hardly believing this day had come. "I'm the fortunate one," she said softly. Martha clucked her tongue. "You're both fortunate. Now, let's get your hair pinned up before we're late to your own wedding." The ceremony was simple but beautiful, held in the church where Clara and Lucas had sat together that first Sunday. Reverend Miller spoke of love's transformative power, of partnerships built on mutual respect and admiration. When the time came to exchange vows, Lucas's voice rang clear and confident. "Clara Louise, when I rode into Provo, I was searching for a place to belong. Instead, I found a person to belong to. You have shown me what it means to love and be loved completely. I promise to cherish you, respect you, and make you smile every day for the rest of our lives." Clara's voice trembled as she recited her own vows. "Lucas Turner, you saw me when others looked past. You loved me when I couldn't love myself. I promise to stand beside you through whatever life brings, to support your dreams as you've supported mine, and to remind you every day that home isn't a place, it's where we're together." As Lucas slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, Clara felt tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. When Reverend Miller pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas gathered her in his arms, kissing her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation dabbed at their eyes. The wedding feast that followed was a true celebration. Clara had insisted on baking the cake herself, a magnificent creation of white cake and raspberry filling, decorated with sugared flowers she had crafted by hand. Lucas had arranged for musicians, and as twilight fell, he led his bride in their first dance as husband and wife. "Happy," he murmured as they swayed together. Clara looked up at him, her heart so full she could hardly speak. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible." Later that night, as snow continued to fall outside their new home, Clara discovered another kind of happiness in Lucas's loving arms. Her fears about her body melted away beneath his adoring gaze and gentle touch. For the first time, she understood that her curves could be a source of pleasure rather than shame, that her softness could be cherished rather than criticized. "You are so beautiful," Lucas whispered in the darkness, his hands mapping the landscape of her body with reverence. "Every inch of you is perfect," and for the first time Clara believed it. The winter passed in a haze of newlywed bliss. Clara and Lucas settled into a routine that combined work and pleasure: mornings at the bakery, afternoons at the livery, or working on further improvements to their home, evenings spent reading by the fire or entertaining friends. True to his wedding vow, Lucas found ways to make Clara smile every day. Sometimes it was with small gifts: a ribbon for her hair, a new cookbook he'd ordered from back east, wildflowers forced to bloom indoors during the coldest months. Other times it was with gestures: drawing her a warm bath when she was tired, massaging her feet after a long day of standing, leaving love notes hidden in her flower canister. But most often, it was simply his unwavering appreciation of her: the way his eyes lit up when she entered a room, his genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings, his constant reminders that he found her beautiful just as she was. By spring, their partnership had extended fully to the bakery. With Lucas's help, Clara implemented her plan to expand the dining area, and they added a selection of French pastries that quickly became the talk of the town. Business flourished, and Clara found herself enjoying her work more than ever. "Have you noticed," Lucas remarked one evening as they walked home, "that Mrs. Patterson no longer looks surprised when I kiss you in public?" Clara laughed. "I think the town has finally accepted that you actually love me." "Their acceptance changes nothing," Lucas said firmly. "I would love you if the entire territory disapproved." Clara squeezed his hand. "I know. That's one of the reasons I love you so much." As summer approached, Clara began experiencing unusual fatigue and occasional nausea in the mornings. At first, she attributed it to the increasing heat and the bakery's busy season. But when the symptoms persisted, Lucas insisted she visit Dr. Wilson. Clara returned from the doctor's office with a radiant smile. "Lucas," she called as she entered their home. "Where are you?" "In the workshop," came his reply. She found him in the small shed behind the house that he had converted into a carpentry shop. Sawdust covered his clothes, and his brow was furrowed in concentration as he worked on what appeared to be a small wooden chest. "What's this?" Clara asked, running her hand along the smooth wood. Lucas smiled. "It was meant to be a surprise for your birthday, a jewelry box." He set down his tools, wiping his hands on a rag. "But you look like you have a surprise of your own. What did the doctor say?" Clara took a deep breath, her hands instinctively moving to her stomach. "He said we're going to have a baby. In January." Lucas froze, his eyes widening. For a moment, he simply stared at her. Then in 2 strides he crossed the workshop and swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in a joyful embrace. "A baby," he whispered, setting her down gently. "Clara, my love, that's wonderful news." Tears of happiness filled Clara's eyes. "You're pleased then?" "Pleased," Lucas laughed, placing his hand reverently over hers on her still flat stomach. "I'm overjoyed. I can't imagine anything more perfect than creating a family with you." As Clara's pregnancy progressed, Lucas became even more attentive, if such a thing were possible. He insisted on taking over the heaviest work at the bakery, hired a young girl to help with cleaning, and began crafting a cradle for their child. Clara bloomed during her pregnancy. The additional weight distributed evenly over her already ample figure, giving her a radiant, maternal glow. Lucas found new ways to express his admiration for her changing body, delighting in the growth of their child and the new curves pregnancy brought. "You're more beautiful than ever," he told her often, his hands caressing the swell of her belly. Not everyone was as appreciative. Clara overheard Mrs. Patterson commenting to another woman in the bakery one day. "She was already so large, how will she manage with the added weight of a child?" Her poor heart. Before Clara could respond, Lucas appeared from the kitchen, his expression thunderous. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, his voice deceptively calm, "my wife's health is excellent, as Dr. Wilson has confirmed. Her generous heart has room for all the love our child could need, and her strong body is perfectly designed for motherhood." His smile was tight. "Now, will you be purchasing anything today, or merely offering unsolicited opinions?" Mrs. Patterson had the grace to look embarrassed. "A dozen rolls, please," she mumbled, avoiding Clara's gaze. After she left, Clara touched Lucas's arm. "You didn't need to defend me." "Yes, I did," Lucas insisted. "No one speaks about my wife that way, not in my presence and certainly not in her own bakery." Clara's heart swelled with love for this man who championed her so fiercely. "Have I told you today that I love you?" she asked softly. Lucas's stern expression melted into a smile. "Yes, but I never tire of hearing it." As winter approached once more, Clara and Lucas prepared for their child's arrival. The nursery was ready, painted a cheerful yellow with white trim. Lucas had crafted not only a cradle but also a rocking chair for Clara, a toy chest, and a small bookshelf already filled with children's stories. "Our child will love books as much as we do," he declared as he arranged the colorful volumes. Clara, now in her 9th month, watched him from the doorway, one hand supporting her back. "Our child will be the most loved baby in the territory," she said. "How could it be otherwise with you as its father?" Lucas crossed to her, placing his hands on either side of her rounded belly. "And you as its mother," he added, kissing her gently. On a snowy January night, almost exactly a year after their wedding, Clara went into labor. Lucas sent for both the doctor and Martha, then held Clara's hand through the long hours that followed. "You're doing wonderfully," he encouraged as her contractions intensified. "You're the strongest woman I know." After 16 hours of labor, Clara gave birth to a healthy son with Lucas's blue eyes and a thatch of dark hair. As Dr. Wilson placed the swaddled infant in her arms, Clara felt a love so powerful it took her breath away. "He's perfect," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Lucas sat beside her on the bed, his own eyes wet with emotion. "Just like his mother," he said, his voice choked with pride and love. They named him William after Lucas's father, with Thomas as a middle name to honor Clara's father. Young William quickly became the center of their world, bringing new joy and challenges to their lives. The days became a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and stolen moments of sleep. Clara was grateful for the help of Martha and the young assistant at the bakery, which allowed her to spend these precious early weeks with her son. Lucas proved to be a natural father, as comfortable cradling William against his broad chest as he was changing diapers or walking the floor with him during fussy nights. Clara often woke to find the two of them in the rocking chair by the window, Lucas softly singing the lullabies his mother had sung to him. "You're a wonder with him," Clara remarked one evening as Lucas expertly bathed their squirming son. Lucas grinned. "He makes it easy. He has your sweet nature." As winter gave way to spring, Clara gradually returned to work at the bakery, often wearing William in a sling across her chest. Customers cooed over the baby, and even Mrs. Patterson had to admit he was a fine-looking boy, despite being so large. "He's perfectly proportioned," Lucas corrected politely but firmly. "The doctor says he's thriving." And thrive he did. William grew rapidly, his cheerful disposition and ready smile winning hearts throughout Provo. By his first birthday, he was walking unsteadily and attempting simple words, Mama and Papa being his favorites. The years that followed brought more children. A daughter, Elizabeth, named after Lucas's sister, arrived 2 years after William, and another son, James, 2 years after that. Each child was welcomed with the same joy and wonder as the first, each adding new dimensions to Clara and Lucas's happiness. Through it all, Lucas kept his wedding promise. Every day, he found ways to make Clara smile through thoughtful gestures, loving words, or simply the warmth of his presence. Even when life presented challenges, a poor harvest that affected business, a fire that damaged part of the bakery, William's bout with scarlet fever that frightened them all, Lucas's love remained constant. As the children grew, the bakery expanded to become one of Provo's most successful businesses. Clara's French pastries became renowned throughout the territory, and they eventually hired 2 full-time assistants to help meet the demand. Lucas divided his time between the bakery and his increasingly successful carpentry business, crafting fine furniture that was sought after by wealthy families in Salt Lake City and beyond. Together, they built a life of comfort and purpose, their home filled with love and laughter. On their 10th anniversary, Lucas surprised Clara with a trip to San Francisco, a city she had always dreamed of visiting. They left the children in Martha's capable hands and embarked on a 2-week adventure that reminded them both of the early days of their courtship. "You ever regret it?" Clara asked one evening as they strolled along the waterfront, the lights of the city twinkling around them. "Regret what?" Lucas asked, his arm secure around her waist. "Settling in Provo. Marrying me. Trading your freedom for family responsibilities." Lucas stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression of disbelief. "Clara Turner, in 10 years have I ever given you reason to think I regretted one moment of our life together?" Clara shook her head. "No, never. But sometimes I wonder if you might have had an easier path with someone else, someone more." "More what?" Lucas challenged gently. Clara gestured to her body, still ample despite the physical demands of motherhood and work. "Someone more conventional, slimmer, more like what men typically want." Lucas cupped her face in his hands. "After all this time, do you still not understand? You are exactly what I want. Your softness, your curves, your strength, your heart. Every part of you is precious to me." His blue eyes were intense in the lamplight. "I have never, for one moment, wished you different in any way." Clara believed him. How could she not, when his love showed in every glance, every touch, every day they spent together? And yet, old insecurities sometimes surfaced, especially as she grew older and her body changed with the passing years. But Lucas's admiration never wavered. When gray began to streak Clara's brown hair, he pronounced it distinguished. When the births of their children left lasting marks on her body, he called them badges of honor. When arthritis began to trouble her hands after years of kneading dough, he massaged them gently each night before bed. As their children grew into adults, they witnessed the power of their parents' enduring love. William, who inherited his father's skill with woodworking, often remarked that he hoped to find a marriage as strong as theirs. Elizabeth, who had her mother's talent for baking, said she would settle for nothing less than a partner who looked at her the way her father still looked at her mother after decades of marriage. When their youngest, James, announced his intention to marry a young woman who, like Clara, was generously proportioned and had faced unkind comments about her size, Clara wasn't surprised when Lucas took the young man aside. "Your mother overheard what you said to Sophia last night," Lucas said as they worked together in the carpentry shop on a cradle for William's first child. "About how beautiful she is, curves and all." James nodded, carefully sanding a spindle. "I was only speaking the truth." "I know," Lucas said, pride evident in his voice. "And I want you to know that's one of the most important gifts you can give her, seeing her true beauty and reflecting it back to her. The world is quick to tell women like your mother and Sophia that they should be different, smaller, less. Your job is to remind her daily that she is perfect exactly as she is." "I learned from the best," James replied with a smile. On their 30th anniversary, with their children grown and the bakery now managed primarily by Elizabeth and her husband, Clara and Lucas decided to semi-retire. They still worked a few days each week, Clara creating special order cakes for weddings and celebrations, Lucas crafting his finest pieces for select clients, but they also took time to enjoy the life they had built. They traveled more, visiting Lucas's family in Kentucky and exploring parts of the country Clara had only read about. They doted on their growing brood of grandchildren, teaching them to bake and build and appreciate the beauty of the Utah wilderness. And each night, they still fell asleep in each other's arms, Lucas's love as steady and true as it had been that first day in Provo when he had caught Clara as she stumbled on the boardwalk. In their 42nd year of marriage, Clara's health began to fail. What started as occasional shortness of breath progressed to more serious heart problems. Dr. Wilson's son, who had taken over his father's practice, prescribed rest and medication, but warned that her condition would likely worsen with time. Lucas refused to accept this verdict without a fight. He took Clara to specialists in Salt Lake City and even Denver, seeking any treatment that might help. When conventional medicine offered limited options, He explored herbal remedies, special diets, anything that might give them more time together. Through it all, he remained her rock, adjusting their home to minimize her exertion, taking over more household duties, reading to her for hours when she was too tired to hold a book herself. "You shouldn't have to be my nurse," Clara protested one evening as Lucas helped her into bed. "I'm not your nurse," Lucas corrected gently. "I'm your husband, and taking care of you is not a burden, it's a privilege." As Clara's mobility decreased, Lucas found new ways to bring joy to her days. He moved her favorite chair to the front porch, where she could watch the grandchildren play in the yard. He brought her fresh flowers daily and arranged for friends to visit regularly. He learned to cook her favorite dishes, though he never quite mastered her pastry techniques. And true to the promise he had made over 4 decades earlier, he found ways to make her smile every single day through stories, small surprises, or simply holding her hand and reminiscing about their life together. "You remember our first walk?" he asked one autumn afternoon as they sat on the porch, a quilt tucked around Clara's legs despite the mild weather. "When you were so suspicious of my intentions," Clara smiled at the memory. "I couldn't fathom why the handsomest man in the territory would want to walk with me. And I couldn't understand why the most fascinating woman I'd ever met didn't realize her own worth," Lucas countered, his blue eyes still bright despite the wrinkles that now framed them. "I thank God every day that you gave me a chance to show you." On a peaceful spring morning in their 45th year of marriage, Clara woke early. Despite her weakened condition, she felt strangely energetic. She watched Lucas sleeping beside her, his face relaxed in repose, silver hair tousled against the pillow. Love welled within her as strong as it had ever been. "Lucas," she whispered, touching his cheek gently. He woke instantly, years of caring for her having made him alert to her voice. "What is it, my love? Do you need something?" Clara shook her head. "I just wanted to tell you something important." Lucas sat up, concern crossing his features. "What is it?" "You have made me happier than I ever thought possible," Clara said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind her words. "From the day we met until this moment, you have loved me completely. You have given me a lifetime of joy, a beautiful family, and the gift of knowing what it means to be truly cherished." She took his hand, pressing it to her heart. "I want you to know that whatever happens, I have had the most wonderful life because I shared it with you." Tears filled Lucas's eyes. "Clara, let me finish," she said softly. "I'm not afraid, Lucas. How could I be when you've shown me what love really means? I just need you to promise me something." "Anything," Lucas vowed, his voice choked with emotion. "Be happy," Clara said simply. "When I'm gone, remember our joy, not your grief. Live fully, love our family, find reasons to smile. That's what would honor me most." Lucas gathered her in his arms, holding her as if he could keep her with him through sheer force of will. "I promise," he whispered against her hair. "But not for a long time yet, Clara. Not for a long time." Clara smiled against his chest, not contradicting him, though she felt a certainty that her time was growing short. They spent the day quietly together, sitting in the spring sunshine, looking through old photographs, and receiving visits from their children and grandchildren. Lucas noticed that Clara seemed unusually at peace, almost radiant despite her frailty. That evening, after Lucas had helped her prepare for bed, Clara asked him to lie beside her and tell her again about the day they met. "I was riding into town, and Thunderbolt nearly ran you down," Lucas began, his voice warm with the familiar story. "I caught your arm to steady you, and when you looked up at me with those beautiful blue eyes, I knew I'd found something special." Clara smiled, her eyes closing as she listened to his deep voice recount the beginning of their love story. As Lucas described their first Sunday walk, He felt her hand go limp in his. "Clara," he whispered, his heart constricting with sudden fear. When she didn't respond, he gathered her close, tears streaming down his face as he realized she had slipped away peacefully in his arms. In the days that followed, all of Provo mourned with Lucas. Clara Turner had become a beloved figure in the community, known for her kindness, her remarkable baking, and the deep love she and Lucas shared. The bakery closed for a week in her honor, and when it reopened, customers left flowers and notes expressing how much she would be missed. True to his promise, Lucas found the strength to celebrate Clara's life rather than merely mourning her loss. At her funeral, he spoke not of sorrow but of gratitude for the 45 years they had shared. He told stories that made the mourners laugh through their tears, of Clara's determination to master French pastry techniques, of her fierce protection of their children, of her unwavering support for his dreams. "Clara once worried that I might regret choosing her," he told the gathered crowd, his voice steady despite his grief. "But the truth is, loving Clara was the easiest, most natural thing I ever did. She made me a better man, a better father, a better human being. Our time together was a gift beyond measure." In the months and years that followed, Lucas kept his promise to live fully. He remained active in the bakery, working alongside Elizabeth to maintain Clara's high standards. He continued his carpentry, creating pieces that incorporated subtle tributes to Clara, a rose carved into a bedpost, her favorite birds adorning a cabinet. He was a devoted grandfather and, eventually, great-grandfather, passing on Clara's recipes and his own woodworking skills to younger generations. He told them stories of their remarkable grandmother, how she had built a successful business, raised 3 wonderful children, and loved completely despite early experiences that might have closed her heart. "Your grandmother taught me the most important lesson I ever learned," he would tell them. "That love isn't about finding someone perfect, it's about seeing the perfection in someone exactly as they are." Lucas lived to the age of 93, remaining sharp and relatively healthy until a brief illness finally reunited him with his beloved Clara. On his last evening, with his family gathered around his bed, he smiled suddenly, his faded blue eyes focusing on something or someone they couldn't see. "There you are," he whispered, his face lighting up with joy. "I've missed you, my love." His oldest granddaughter later swore that in the moment before Lucas Turner took his final breath, she saw a look of such happiness cross his face that it could only mean one thing: Clara had come to bring him home. In Provo, the story of Clara and Lucas Turner became something of a legend, the tale of an extraordinary love that began with a chance encounter on a dusty street and grew into a lifetime of happiness neither had expected to find. Their bakery, now run by the 4th generation of Turners, still uses many of Clara's original recipes, and the beautiful furniture Lucas crafted graces homes throughout the valley. But their greatest legacy lives on in the hearts of those who knew them, the example they set of love that sees past appearances to the true beauty within, and the reminder that happiness can find us in the most unexpected ways, if only we have the courage to embrace it.